Okay.
Yeah. Excellent.
Hi, I want to welcome everybody, both everybody who's on the Zoom call today, as well as everybody who's watching this from home. Um, I cannot tell you how excited I am about today's lesson. I have been working with Stephanie for several weeks and putting her slide deck together, and I seriously believe that the work that she has started with the session she's doing today could be a whole line of lifelong study if someone were interested. Today, we're talking about nurturing through the transitions in life. And Stephanie's really focusing on the transitions of a woman's body. But I'd also like to preface it that as we talk about these transitions, I think we should think about it from the perspective of the divine feminine rather than a woman's body. Because while certainly we're going to talk about like periods and having babies and things like that, the nurturing part of this and the idea of using food to nurture the people that we are and the people that we love, it's so important. So, uh, I am just absolutely thrilled to introduce Stephanie. Stephanie and I have a really interesting way that we've met. I used to own a farm in Vermont, and I responded to an ad on an electronic community board for a couple who was looking to have a wedding at a farm in Vermont. It was going to be like a pagan Native American Viking kind of shindig. And I thought my farm is perfect because I have a uh, for real Druid circle, stone circle, and a for real Zen labyrinth garden. So we connected about their wedding. And then the day they showed up to see the farm, by the time they left that day, we had agreed that they would buy my farm and I would be moving on to other adventures. And so uh such a friendship has developed and such an amazing person that Stephanie is. And I'm so happy to not only call her my friend now, but to be working with her in this capacity as well. So, without further ado, Stephanie, I will pass it over to you. And I have your slide deck up, so you let me know when to start it and when to move things along.
Okay. So there are a lot of transitions that won't be covered that are really super important. Um, Infertility, abortion, pregnancy loss, trauma, uh, gender transition, like male to female gender transition, and caring for yourself during perimenopause are almost identical. So there's a whole lot of things we won't cover. We're dipping our toe in an infinity pool. Just to make that very clear. But from there we can start. Also have mercy on me. I'm very nervous about this.
You'll do amazing. And if you need any help, we're here for you.
Well, I'm good at conversations and storytelling. It's when things get organized that I get all nervous about it. Like if I go off script for a second, it's going to be a problem. Nobody here is going to care.
Nope.
So, um, nurturing through the transitions of life, I did not realize it was a lifelong study for me. It was just something, it was important once I had children. And then I um, sort of went back in time and nurtured myself through a lot of trauma and other things. I was the loving adult that child me didn't have and needed. And I fell down all sorts of rabbit holes that had to do with taking care of women in various stages of their life. Um, I didn't even realize that it was a shareable wisdom until all of this sort of started to come together. I mean, it's shareable, but for me, most of my teaching comes from having conversations with people, just hanging out. And when I spend a little bit of time with someone, I can kind of tell um, what stories resonate for them, what things will um, hit for them, what they need to hear, what they don't need to hear. And so, since this isn't a one-on-one, treat it like a buffet. You take what resonates and what fits you, and you leave the rest behind. And that's it. Okay. Uh, mind, body, soul. So everyone knows you can feed your body and not nourish literally anything else. We've we've all done that. But you can definitely eat healthy in every other way and still not be nourishing your soul. Um, I feed my mind all the time, but I have to be very careful because it's not always something that inspires my soul. So, uh, as an example, I love true crime, but I have to limit myself because I will get into this spiral. I was a former 911 dispatcher. I was in emergency services, and sometimes it's hard to forget that the worst of humanity is not the majority of humanity. So, really, what you take in does have an effect on who you become. And it's okay to chew on some junk every now and then, just like everything else. I watch crappy YouTube and shows that I would be embarrassed to admit that I watch. But I also balance that out with things that I know are nourishing. And we have to do the same thing with food and what we put in our body. So when you're feeding your soul, you are nourishing everything, your mind, your body, everything. And does everybody have, before we get like the ball really rolling, does everybody have some pretzels and some melted chocolate and some accoutrement,
So I'll
spices and
confess,
whatnot?
I'll confess I didn't have pretzels. After all of the prep this week, I don't have pretzels. So I got a banana. Because you can dip anything in chocolate and it will be delicious.
Yes, yes. I have a former coworker who swore by green apples. So, which I like with peanut butter, but not with chocolate. So yes, you can dip anything in chocolate. And you'd be amazed at the things that you can sprinkle on to that chocolate that are very nourishing in all the ways that don't seem like they would go together. It's synergy, right? The Sum of the parts being greater than the whole. Things that seem like they don't go together, you put them together and it's a whole new taste, a whole new thing. But in this case, it was just sort of a snack to get us through this and to introduce feeding the hungry ghost. So a lot of you, I'm sure, have heard of shadow work, where you look within and instead of taking all the dark, icky bits and it down really low until it comes out in the most unhealthy possible ways, you sort of face it. And every culture has a version of this, but my favorite is the Buddhist and Chinese traditional of the hungry ghost, because they're beings that are condemned to walk the earth. They're always eating, consuming, never full, never satiated. And um, we all know someone who has been, or we have been ourselves, haunted by a hungry ghost. Hunger and thirst endlessly for something, money, power, sex, alcohol, drugs. It's all self-medicating. Like if we're gonna look at it from like not spiritual terms, from a medical scientific perspective, it's self-medicating, right? We have issues and trauma and all these things we don't want to deal with, and we self-medicate. But there is no food, drink, drug, or person that can fill the void carried by a hungry ghost. There just isn't. And the steps for healing to banish a hungry ghost are complex. I wouldn't even be comfortable beginning to get into that here. But similar to shadow work, it's very individualized, but it is something that is really, really important to, yes, it's a disconnection. Callie said it's a disconnection. It is living inauthentically. It is disconnecting from yourself to please or take care of everything outside of you. And you can't pour from an empty cup. And eventually, the hungry ghost or your shadow self will catch up with you. And if you don't manage the way that that happens, it will happen in very ugly, ugly ways that don't just hurt you, they hurt the people around you, right? People who don't heal their wounds bleed all over the people who love them the most. That's just the way that it is. Um, but we, if we start respecting rites of passage and the transitions in life, there is a way to avoid falling into that void or developing that void or healing it if it was developed, like for me, in childhood. So rites of passage have sort of fallen by the wayside, but I think that they are absolutely critical, whether it be the hero's journey, which we all hear about in most fictional tales, but the heroine's journey is equally critical and much more complex, actually. And so that's sort of what these transitions are, is finding our way through all of that. Anybody have any questions before we move to the next? Yes. Yes. Connection to the self first. It's that whole put on your oxygen mask before you try to help anyone else, because if you're unconscious, who can you help? What can you do? So the type of pretzel that you picked, the type of chocolate that you picked, the um, things that you picked to accompany that, those all have deep symbolism spiritually, but also nutritionally. So when they're like, when people have cravings, like real genuine cravings, not just pregnant women, but anyone, it usually signifies some sort of nutritional deficiency. Um, if you're in tune with your body, you kind of feel it, see it, feel it coming on before it's a problem. You can head it off. But most of us are so wrapped up in paying the bills and making it to the next day that we lose sight of those things, and we don't know why everything's going sideways and nothing feels right, and why we're craving all this weird stuff. But no matter what you picked for your snack to go along with it, there's a symbolism there, and it all matters, and it's important, and delving into that can help you connect with yourself, connect with what you need, what your subconscious is screaming at you to take care of and fix.
Stephanie?
Yes.
It was really interesting because when I was pulling out stuff to prep for this part of the session, I'm the type of person that cooks a lot. I have a cupboard full of spices that I use on a regular basis. And so I'm like, open up the cupboard and I'm like, what am I feeling called for? And the thing that I found myself craving for was crystallized ginger, and I didn't have any. But what was shocking to me was I didn't know I was craving that till I went looking for it in the cupboard, and I pulled out some different things, but I'm like, I was craving it enough that I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to go buy some crystallized ginger and come home and do this because there must be something. And I have dried ginger in the cupboard, and I'm like, no, that's not going to do it. I want the crystallized version. And I'm like, I just found that really interesting that I hit a craving that I didn't even know I was having.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the same happened to me. I already had mine pre-picked out because with everything else going on, I didn't need to be making decisions and trying to do this. But then when I got in
Yeah.
the cupboard, I actually I like a little bit of spice in certain foods, but I found myself picking cayenne pepper and chili powder. Not anything I would normally pair with chocolate and whatnot. And it's hitting a spot too as I snack on it. So I'll have to look into that later.
Well, I had the same reaction because, like, I helped you prepare the slide deck. So like I knew everything that was here, and like none of that appealed. So here's what I picked. I picked pink sea salt, that's on the list, but it was the pink sea salt that I was craving. Chinese five spice powder.
Hmm.
Like that, it's got clove and anise and cinnamon, and so it's got things in it, but I think of this as like egg rolls and Chinese stir fry. I would never have thought of it in chocolate. And
It's
then
actually also very
premium,
Christmassy. If
true.
you put it in a stove potpourri, it's very Christmassy.
Yeah. Um, I'd be interested to know if other people had gone through their cupboards and found themselves surprised in any way by the spices they would pick. Nobody's sharing. That's okay. Oh,
I'll quickly say something because I've always got something to say. um, it's funny this morning. I could have melted chocolate, but my body is saying no chocolate. So I actually I've actually gone for something but savory this morning instead of sweet. So um, yeah, it's really interesting how if you do follow your intuition, um, your body will take on all the nourishment that it needs. Um, yeah, and this morning it was not chocolate for me. So I'm listening intently, and I will be making these as a snack for later on, I think. Stephanie.
I forgot about the morning night thing. And
Mm,
yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the thing is so often we don't listen to our bodies because it's a matter of convenience or affordability or whatever else. But if you just give yourself a second, you don't have to stop and meditate for an hour or do 3 hours of yoga. Like if you just stop and listen to your body for a second, it will tell you. It will tell you what it needs, what it wants, where you're at. Yeah. Okay, so moving on.
do you want to go over the different health and symbolisms?
So, yes. What I find interesting is when people are drawn to certain things, it's partially a physical craving, but not always. Um the like with ginger, passion, money, prosperity. So I have craved ginger when I'm not feeling well because I'm not a big fan of the flavor in and of itself by itself. It goes well with other things, but if I am craving that specifically, like ginger tea, either I have a physical ailment, like nausea or cramps. Um, Sometimes it has nothing to do with the physical. Sometimes what I'm craving is spiritual. Um, I have fallen into work and lost all connection with any passion in my life, or, you know, not happiness, but that unfettered joy, sort of the inner child thing, you know. When I crave cinnamon toast, which isn't often because it's a lot of sugar, and when I eat too much sugar, I get sort of a crash. But if I crave cinnamon toast, I know 100% that my inner child is going, hey, hey, you're adulting a lot. You haven't colored lately. You haven't done any artsy stuff. You haven't worn your cute pajamas. And so it's sort of an alarm system for me when I crave something like that. And it's like, okay, wait, is this a physical craving or is this a spiritual craving? And so all of it matters. All of it is important. We communicate with ourselves in the oddest ways, but it's all important.
Next slide. Oh, no, that was not what I wanted to do. Hold on. Sorry.
Sorry, the animals find the not being allowed in the room unacceptable.
I get that at my house all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, normally I have an open door policy, but they don't understand why I do not today.
Yeah.
So I was going to go on Canva and make a really pretty um, visual. This was something I sort of drew up just as a idea of what was going on, but it it sort of felt right. So we all have cycles. Men cycle, it's funny that women are considered unstable because our cycles are actually pretty predictable, theirs are not, and they're like this through the day, whereas ours sort of follow a little bit more predictable. But the cycles of the moon, the seasons, the cycles of our life, our menstrual cycle, the progression through pregnancy, and whether that be a physical pregnancy that produces a child or the creation of something else, creating a business, all of them have these same sort of cycles. Winter is when we go within and we nurture ourselves and things start to percolate, ideas start to percolate, but it's more about being outside of the world and inside of ourselves. And then spring comes and we sort of start to stretch your arms out, and us introverts kind of start to talk to other people a little bit. And whatever idea we've had, we're like planting the seeds for that. And then summer is just a very, I hate to say party season, but spiritually it is. It's kind of like just enjoying the abundance of all the things. And fall is where we harvest all the seeds we've sown in the spring, we're harvesting in the fall, but we're also preparing for that sort of going within again. And so every cycle that we have syncs up. with a season and the phases of the moon and all of these things. And I have, so if you have ADD, you understand how pattern recognition is everything. And once I saw the pattern of all of this, it was kind of like the first time someone showed me the golden ratio. I was like, oh, everything makes sense. And once I started to respect what my body needed in these phases, um, first with my menstrual cycle, when I started to respect that when I'm menstruating, I really need to kind of be left alone and do the bare minimum and give myself grace. And when it was follicular, I was absolutely all about I could organize anything. I could color code and file and clean and do all of it's the nesting. And once ovulation hit, that's when I would schedule any kind of job interview or anything where I really needed to have that glow. And the luteal phase was more of a um getting prepared again for everything to start. Once I started to respect the superpower that is our menstrual cycle, and I realized how that resonated with every other phase of life, everything kind of fell into place. Um, we the calendar we have is patriarchal. We should have a 13-month calendar. That is how our bodies function. It's how the moon functions. It's how most of the earth and the crops and everything else functions is with those phases. And so I pay attention and I follow the calendar that I've been given in the world that I live in. But separate from that, I have a 13-month calendar that I respect the flow of. So I know it seems like convoluted maybe a bit at first. Um, the first time that I heard Maiden Mother Crone wasn't it, that there was another one, Maga. I was like, wait, what? But no, the triple goddess. That I formed my whole belief system around the triple goddess. But literally everything else had these four phases. Even postpartum after pregnancy is called the fourth trimester. It's it's if we pay respect to these phases, and sort of follow the guidance. It's not written in stone. If you're menstruating, you don't have to lock yourself in a room, because I'm a firm believer that the huts we were all sent to menstruate in were not our punishment. It was our whole, oh no, I have to go be away from everybody and not be around all these guys for a while. Oh no. Send me to the red tent. Oh no. Yeah. And then as soon as we're out of sight, we're like skipping. Woohoo! And yeah. So there's so much to this that it'd be a whole class in and of itself. But it does illustrate how everything kind of syncs together as far as the seasons of our life in the minutia into the larger universe. So nurturing the maiden, I actually didn't, of course, learn anything about nurturing the maiden until I was well into my adulthood. There wasn't shame in my family about it. My mom talked to me about it. As a matter of fact, she was as mentally ill as she was, and toxic as she was. She absolutely celebrated the becoming a woman. And so, within 24 hours of my first menstruation, my entire family and every family friend we ever had knew about it, which at the time was horrifying. But it's important because the way it was presented to me was Eve's curse, right? She screwed up, and so now we all have to suffer. Between that and childbirth, that's our lot in life. And no one ever explained to me when I was younger that it's actually a superpower. We have all these things that we're capable of doing through the different phases of our cycles, and there are ways to care for ourselves. So this is, to me, this is one of the transitions in life that, depending on how you're raised, you are either allowed to blossom or you are stifled and not. And this is where the shame starts to get instilled. So with my daughters, I was like, at first, when my eldest told me, "Oh my gosh, this hurts so bad," and I'm like, "Yeah, well, welcome to being a chick. Sorry." And then the women in our family, have the good luck to have the ovulation pain as well. And so she's like, "But I'm not even on my period. Why am I hurting right now?" And I was like, "Yeah, well, welcome to being a chick. I don't know what to tell you. It is what it is." Um, and then I found out, as I learned things, I was like, "Oh, it doesn't have to be this way." So the week before you start, you're going to start your period. We're going to start some magnesium. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And we started finding these ways to nurture ourselves. As I'm trying to teach my daughters how to nurture themselves, is when I started to learn how to nurture myself. But it's really a time to explore the world, and there needs to be a community of women, of elders, that are there to support that exploration without shame, without social training about her place, about where she should be, where she belongs, what she's allowed to feel, what she's not allowed to feel. Um, this is a very controversial subject. It's not on the slide because of that, but there is a bodily organ that a woman was given that no one else was, that has no other function at all. It serves no purpose. Scientifically, no purpose except pleasure. And I think that's important. The clitoris does absolutely nothing to continue the species, to all of these things. Its sole purpose is pleasure. And I think that speaks volumes, that we were given a special little spot on our body that doesn't serve any other purpose or any other agenda but to give us pleasure. And sharing that with my daughters helped remove a lot of the shame they'd been feeling about the feelings that were starting to kind of spring up in them. And it gave them a trust in the conversations we had about protecting themselves and being careful about what they did with those feelings, and how a lot of those hormones and feelings are like making decisions while drunk or on drugs. Like, I was like, you have to have plans about how you're going to handle certain things, because the way that this affects your body is similar to if you were on drugs. You will make bad choices if you don't have a plan already in place about how you're going to handle certain situations you encounter. The fact that girls are starting so much earlier now, especially with the forever chemicals and the plastics and unfortunately, girls exposed to sexual trauma young start earlier. Um, it, it's becoming an even more critical conversation that we have with our girls and our boys. There are men in Congress who were mad they put tampons in the bathrooms because they thought, well, why can't she just hold it? Because they thought it was like pee. Why can't she just hold it like we do? Why do we have to? That blew my mind. I'm like, they didn't teach these boys that little bit. And so I have two daughters and one son, and I felt that was a part of my job, was teaching him enough, not enough to, you know, be upsetting, but just enough for him to understand that our bodies are very, very different. They function very differently, and there's a certain latitude for that. But as the symptoms happen, the abdominal pain and the breast tenderness and the mood swings and the fatigue and all of these things that make you not feel like yourself, that needs to be nurtured all across the board, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, all of these things. But nutritionally, there's a cake. There's a cake that my daughters, so I used to be a cocktail waitress, and we all of us synced up, all of our cycles synced up. So we would get this lava cake from the restaurant next door, and we would share this lava cake because for whatever reason, if we had this lava cake before our shift, we were okay. Like, we felt like we could handle the world. I didn't find out till later that there's all these reasons for that. You know, the dark chocolate has magnesium and copper, and the coffee, which is caffeine, it depends. Some people say that it makes things worse for them if you consume caffeine a lot throughout the month. It's not going to help you a lot during your cycle. But if you don't, then it is very helpful medicinally. It helps with headaches and cramps, and the magnesium and the copper and the chocolate help the uterine contractions relax a little bit. They've done lengthy studies that women who consumed caffeine had shorter and lighter cycles. So there's there's all of these actual sciencey things about this cake that help. But at the end of the day, this is the cake that I would make for the girls. And again, because we were all in the same house, we were synced up. So there were, and there is an option to not include the rum. For the cake, the rum burns off. As you know, when you cook with alcohol, it burns off. For the icing, there's an alternative to that icing that doesn't have the rum in it. As far as I'm concerned, once my girls reach 16, if they wanted a little tipsy in their cake before we went to bed at night and it made them feel better, I didn't have a problem with it. Maybe I belong in, the other countries where a little wine at dinner for the kids was okay. But it helped. But it wasn't just the cake. It was everything that went into preparing the cake. It was teaching them how to prepare the cake so that they could take care of themselves when I wasn't available to do so. It was the sitting down and eating the cake together and crying, like picking some movie that we knew for sure was going to make us cry to get it all out. Or this is a recipe that you can follow to the letter, but I've actually not ever followed a recipe to the letter. So as far as teaching my daughters to cook, um, they knew the only way to learn most of the recipes I make is to come in and make them with me. I can give them a recipe from online, but that's probably not the recipe that they've eaten. Because I don't typically function off of exact measurements. It's more intuitive. But the exact measurements make an absolutely amazing cake. And because of
Jan,
the caffeine in it, it gives you the boost. It's, yeah.
Jan has a question.
Oh, I was just going to ask, what's 2 tablespoons of half for the ice
So
cream?
half and half is it's a version. So milk, half and half, cream, heavy cream, butter. The difference between those things is the percentage of fat.
It's
And so I'll half and half. People in the US use it for their coffee, but really it's considered an in-between of whole fat milk and cream
Oh.
because
Kind
of
of
the
like
fat
if you
content.
took yeah, it's like if you took half heavy cream and half milk
Yes.
and
Right.
combined it would be that. But
Yeah.
Stephanie, to your point about intuitively never following a recipe, I made her cake today. And let me just tell you, this is number one, it's probably the simplest recipe for a from scratch cake. Like I just went down to the thing, threw everything in a bowl. I didn't like pre do anything, and it baked perfectly. I did not have dark rum. So, but I do have other alcohol in the house. So I started sniffing the bottles of alcohol and ended up using amaretto,
Oh, ooh.
which is absolutely delicious. It was a toss up of whether I was going to use amaretto or frangelica, which is like an almond.
Yeah.
I think either would have been amazing, but this is now the cake recipe that I want to make whenever I'm grieving because it's got a little bit of sugar. It's got sugar, it's got alcohol, it's got the chocolate. It's just scrumptious. So, I'm not going to make this all the time, but number one, it was super easy to do. It's incredibly delicious. And of course, I made it putting love into it. So it just feels nurturing. It feels like this delicious hug.
Yeah. No, oh my gosh, that's what it is. It's a hug and a cake. Yes.
It is.
And it's funny because the girls know they would never ask me to just make this on the random. But if they ask me to make it, I know it's because they need it,
Yeah.
irregardless of where they are in their cycle. Because it's also a good breakup cake. When my eldest got her heart broken for the first time, this was the cake that we made.
Yep.
Yep.
It's amazing. I recommend everybody who's watching it. We'll post the slides in the Facebook group. Um, absolutely. I would 1,000% recommend making it. It's so easy and it's so good.
Yeah, so this is of course the symbolism is very important. Um the new beginnings, the lightness, raising energy, the sweetness of life, friendship, love, protection, strength, healing, and love are all things we need to feel a little extra when we're cycling at many other times in our lives, but definitely when we're cycling. And oh, alcohol, it is a symbol of a connection to the divine. Dionysus is one of my favorites just because of the ability to have untethered joy. But there's all these other sciency things that are true about it. There's the magnesium and the copper, and when they say dark chocolate, it's anything over 70% cocoa, I believe, is where the medicinal effects start to really um, sort of come into play. That's actually what I picked. I picked a very, very dark chocolate for my pretzels because um, I don't I don't know who's big Harry Potter fans, but the reason they gave them chocolate, it was specifically dark chocolate, though they just say chocolate, when the Dementors attacked, is because of the replenishment that comes with that. It's an antidepressant of sorts. It gets certain it triggers certain endorphins in the body, which aren't just pain relievers, but are also mood boosters. So the symbolism is important, but it's not just symbolism. Much like chicken soup, the symbolism is important, but it's not just symbolism. There's a whole lot of real value nutritionally behind that. So the mother stage of a woman's life, um, again, it's associated with full moon. It's that urge to create. Sometimes that means making babies, but sometimes it's other things. My very best friend is childless by choice. And this was the time when she was doing some of the most amazing art I've ever seen and developing her career. My eldest daughter is, her and her boyfriend are, what do they call them? Dinks, double income, no kids. And by choice, but she is still so creative, all that vitality, all of that youth, all of that energy. It is absolutely still being put forth to create. And it's the ticking clock. You know when you've hit this phase because the clock ticks. Even if you don't want to procreate or have children, there's a clock internally that just starts to tick for us that lets us know this is it. This is the time when we have something we aren't going to have again, and we need to use it to the fullest. So the mother phase, if it is going to be, you know, pregnancy and having children, or as my daughter teases me, dropping a couple pups. Um, there's different ways to nurture through that go along with the trimesters of pregnancy, but they also go along with a lot of other things we could be doing with this time in our life. But for pregnancy, as a birth and postpartum doula, this is something that is always been kind of important to me. But in the first trimester, usually you're trying to control the nausea. What I picked for this was, as a recipe, was a charcuterie board, and it's the rosemary ginger apple compote that is absolutely the key piece of this. Everything else is sort of, you can pick any kind of cheeses and accoutrement that you want, but controlling the nausea is the kind of everything the first trimester. I've heard of people who don't get nauseous. I've never met one in real life. Maybe they exist. I don't know. Kelly?
I was just looking at the slide and thinking that um, even if you've never been a mother, as women, we're all mothers, whether we've had children or not, because we have an even keener sense of creation than men do, simply because we have the ability to give birth. Um, and it's a total reflection of the whole creation process. You know, the first trimester, the nausea, the discomfort. And if you think about when you're creating something, the first thing that happens is discomfort. You're like, this, I don't know what to do. I don't know if this is going to be great. I don't know, it's really uncomfortable. And then you get comfortable with being uncomfortable, which is that second trimester. And unless you hang with that discomfort, you don't actually get to the third trimester or the postpartum. You've just
Right.
got to hang with that tension, with that discomfort. Um, and then you start birthing your idea, and then once your idea is birthed, once it's come into manifestation, you still have to nurture it for it to grow and become everything that it can be. So it's a complete reflection of um, our human condition, our ability to create. So thank you. I just
Yes.
wanted to mention that. It just came to me when I looked at that slide.
No, that was something I really wanted to put across, because I didn't want anyone who had, by choice or by circumstance, not been a mother, to feel in any way like this didn't apply to them, because again, it is the stepping out of your comfort zone, the getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, all of that. That is so, all of this could exactly apply to starting a new business or advancing in your career. It 100% does.
Or
Yes.
creating an artwork or whatever
Yes.
it is.
Yeah.
Mm.
And we do have a different connection to creation, whether or not we um birth children. We absolutely have a different perspective on creation. And that's why I like with the avocado and tomato toast. It is a very simple, healthy, there's a lot of symbolism that goes along with it. Um, but it's also something that's good for when you're intentionally eating for two. The third trimester isn't just up to birth and that's that. The third trimester includes birth. And that birthing process, again, even when applied to creating a business or artwork or anything else, it is uncomfortable. And I don't know anyone who has given or witnessed birth, but there comes a point called transition where you decide, I can't do this. I've changed my mind. This was a horrible idea. I'm just going to go ahead and go home. And the baby can just keep living in there forever. That's a better idea. It's safer there, right? So I can't do this. I thought I could. I was wrong. So I'm tapping out. And that is transition. And when that hits, that means it's almost time. It's almost time. Everything is coming to a head. It's one of the big clues that it is almost time. And so that's why it's encompassed as part of the third trimester, that birth, is because that is the um, epitome of the discomfort that you're going to feel before you sort of get your, I hate to say reward, but before you sort of get to see what all this work, all of this discomfort and everything else come to fruition. And yes, there's a ton of work after that. Like you said, the nurturing, whether you nurse or you bottle feed or however that goes, you are still nurturing this life. And that's actually kind of the beginning of the hard part. But when you're in labor, that doesn't feel, that feels like the hardest thing you're ever going to have to do your whole last life. You find out it's not. But in the moment, you definitely feel that. And then so that's why there's 2 recipes for postpartum. The lactation cookies are absolutely wonderful for helping build milk supply. Um, and helping with, so that goes back into the intention and what you're making. Whether you make the lactation cookies or somebody who loves you dearly makes them for you. Part of building that milk supply is the relaxation and being able to, for the milk to let down. And that comes back to the whole women supporting women. This idea that we abandoned for some, I don't even know. I honestly, I've researched World War I and World War II, and it was only 2 grandmas ago. We were multi-generational households and all these women supporting each other through the hardest times in our lives, from birth to death and everything in between. So having that tribe there to support you through each of these transitions is so important. And that's what I hope to create here. I try to create in the interactions I have with people. And so like the slow cooker teriyaki chicken, whether you're nursing or not, you need to be taking in nutrition. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot build milk if you're not nurturing yourself, if you're not staying hydrated and all of these things. And so that's one of those that is healthy, tastes good, but also dump it and forget it for a few hours and then you have a meal sort of thing. Hopefully somebody brings that meal to you. Hopefully somebody drops that off on your doorstep a couple days after you get home from the hospital, or if you had the baby at home, like I had my last one, they bring it to you. But if they don't, it's still something you can do for yourself where you're not taking a ton of time away. You're not losing sleep. You're not having to put hours of preparation in that turn you from feeling loving to resentful. And still nurture yourself.
No, Stephanie, the other part about like the slow cooker teriyaki is you get to smell it during the day. And I think that's a special kind of nurturing. You know, when I made the cake this morning, like the whole house just smelled amazing while it was cooking. Like the hug began when the smell began. And if you think about like Thanksgiving, part of the best part of Thanksgiving for me is smelling that turkey cooking because I know that it's going to be there. And I think anything you can put in the crock pot like that is the same way.
Yeah, no, and that is my favorite thing about the crock pot is even though it's going to take about 8 to 10 hours as people walk through the house, whether they're leaving for work, coming home from school, whatever it may be, it's like, oh, what are we having? Oh, what's that about? Yeah. And so I actually have the family starts to sort of gather around me the closer it gets. So what time's that going to be ready? Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. So the nice thing about a charcuterie board is it is 100% you can personalize it. And again, it goes back to what Maya was saying before is it doesn't matter if you're opening jars and packages or if you are making all of these things from the scratchiest of scratch. You're milking the goat and you're making the cheese, or you're going down to the local grocery store and buying a packet of cheese and chopping it into cubes. Um, none of that matters. And tastes are highly variable. So being able to personalize is an important thing. And my favorite thing about charcuterie boards in general is I get to have like a little taste of all the things. Um, that rosemary ginger apple compote though is absolutely something I would include, or a tart raspberry jam, because those are both things that are very, very helpful, especially when there's nausea. Um, keeping the salt levels up in your body. That's why the saltine crackers next to the bed is critical. But also, sugar is the way that they treat nausea. If you go to the store right now to buy an anti-nausea medicine for your kid, you know what it is? It's the syrup they put in Slurpees. That's what it is. It's the sugar syrup that they put in Slurpees. It's the same thing. Um, when I worked at the Chinese food restaurant, Mrs. Wu, if anybody was sick, she would take Coca-Cola and she would boil ginger in it. And it was because it would boil the Coca-Cola down basically to the sugar syrup and then the ginger. And you'd drink that and you'd think maybe for a minute that you might not survive this experience. And then you'd go to bed that night and you'd wake up the next day and you were good. So, so this is again, it's one of those things that will help with the nausea, but it has all sorts of loving symbolism involved in it as well. Yep. This is actually one of the simplest sort of eating for two recipes. So with my youngest child, I worked on ambulance. We worked 24, 48, 72. There was a Christmas where we had a lot of sick calls and I worked a 96-hour shift. And so eating healthy was difficult, but also I was pregnant and slightly, I kind of gotten over the nausea, but there are certain houses you can walk into in certain conditions. I'm not going to gross anybody out here, but this was one of those things that I could make very quickly in the ambulance station and not have to worry about, you know, well, by the time I'm done cooking it, we're going to have a call. I mean, because there are times I get emergency calls where I was in the shower with conditioner in my hair. So the the very quick and easy things were the way that I gave myself good nutrition while I was working on ambulance with that youngest one. And this was a go-to. Again, the symbolism of everything is important, but so is the nutritional value. So I love trail mix. I despise raisins. I don't know why. I don't like them. I think it's a texture thing. I'm not entirely sure. So I make my own trail mix. Or if we have to buy it at the store, like we're on a road trip or something, I'm lucky because my husband is willing to eat anything out of a mixed bag of something that I don't like, whether it be the pretzels from the Chex Mix or the raisins from the trail mix. I can buy literally anything in a store, eat the parts I want, and I know he'll eat what I don't like. I'm very lucky in that way. But this is something that you can create on your own, choosing what to put in based on what you know your body needs, or like these spices, what you're craving, or you can buy it in the store. The previous not evidence-based wisdom was that women should not eat when they're in labor. Um, I don't know about outside of the US, but we're gradually moving away from that and allowing women to eat while they're in labor. And it's critical. It's critical to keeping your energy up and all of these other things. But it's a really good snack for leading up to the birth when the baby has squished your stomach to this big and you can't fit anything else. And when you're in labor and you need uh concentrated nutrients. You need to eat a very little bit and get a lot of nutrition from it. But also the symbolism behind every single one of these things is also spiritually nurturing. And giving birth is hard. So any nurturing you can get, whether it be physical, spiritual, it all matters. It all counts, it all helps. So along with that is the raspberry leaf tea. For the last 2 weeks of my pregnancy with my youngest, I drank straight raspberry leaf tea. It's a uterine toner. I think that it helped tremendously. It is not something that you should be drinking as a concentrate without anything else before the 36th week, because being a uterine toner, it can cause contractions. And literally anything we talk about here, you should be clearing with a medical provider if you are pregnant. Absolutely. This is a little bit more diluted. It's not just the red raspberry leaf, but it's also some nettle and alfalfa. Again, a lot of symbolic things behind this, but also evidence-based, science-backed. I have a little tiny flip top jar that has just a little bit of the raspberry leaf tea that I drank while I was in labor with my youngest. And it sits on my altar, and it will until she decides to have a child, and then it will go on to her altar. But it is it's one of those things that actually anybody outside the US, you guys get this. This is just a US thing. I didn't realize what tea time meant and how important it was and why it mattered. I didn't realize that hitting the pause button on the whole day and everything happening and sitting down and just sipping a hot beverage, even if it was the tiniest of breaks, even if it was 10 minutes, it resets everything. And so for this, it's nutritionally valuable, it's symbolically valuable, but really the ritual of it is where I found the real value. It was the stopping everything. I wasn't taking care of anyone else. Everyone else could F off. I was going to take 10 minutes that belonged to me, where I steeped some tea and I sat and I inhaled the steam and I sipped it. And I actually had to set a timer because, all of the rest of life. But since I have done that, I have not abandoned it. That is, I hit the pause button when I need to hit the pause button, and everyone in my home and in my family understands why that's important and respects that. So that's a big part of the tea. So again, these lactation cookies are super helpful. I had to leave out, I can have coconut oil. I can't have actual coconut or coconut milk. I'm allergic to coconut. So I have adjusted this recipe in numerous ways for numerous people. The thing I haven't tried though is, again, I have not tried it vegan. I've not tried it with gluten-free. So there are some things that I'm not sure how they would work. You would have to give it a go. As a matter of fact, if you give it a go, let me know. Because I know there are a lot of people with sensitivities who couldn't have a lot of the things that are in here. There are adjustments that would need to be made, but they do work really, really well. Milk supply was not an issue for me with my first two, but with my youngest, the stress levels that I was under, I actually did have to work to build that milk supply. So, and to get the stress to step aside for a moment so my milk would let down. But these are, and that's something else too, is in making these, whether you're the one making them and that ritual is where you're finding your relaxation, or somebody who cares about you and loves you is making them for you. There's a relaxation that comes with that as well, knowing that there's somebody looking out for you.
So the lactation cookies took 2 slides. So this is just the additional information. So we'll keep going.
So again, this is one that whether somebody has made this for you and you're warming it up, or you have thrown it in the morning because you were already up with the baby at 4:42 in the morning, and you're like, well, I may as well get the slow cooker going. Smelling it cooking through the day, knowing that you're still going to be able to feed your family and yourself a healthy meal, despite everything else you have going on. Um, and again, the nutrition behind it. Whether you're breastfeeding or not, our postpartum period is called the 4th trimester for a reason. Our bodies take an additional 3 months at the least. That's with an uncomplicated, easy peasy birth, to rebalance. And so the easier you can go on yourself while still providing adequate nutrition, the better.
Stephanie, the next slide is the manga and the queen, but before we go on to that, let's take like a 5-minute break and give everybody a chance to either get a snack, more water, something to drink, or use the restroom. And then we'll be
Yes.
back in 5 minutes. So that would be about 21 past the hour.
Perfect.
And boy, I just wish that I'd had known Stephanie and had all this information when I was pregnant, because I think it would have changed things dramatically. Kelly, do we want to pause the recording briefly?
Everybody back, mostly, sort of, kind of ready, little. So I used to refer to things in terms of years, like, oh, in the 70s, oh, in the 60s, oh, women barely got the right to vote at this time and got the right to have a credit card without her husband's permission at this time. And I realized it's very abstract for most people. Like for me, the 90s was 10 years ago, and I can't adjust to anything else. The 90s was 10 years ago. Even though that's not possible, seeing as I have adult children born in the 90s. So I've had to adjust the way that I associate. It's the same with driving directions. You can tell me to go east on this street and west on this street, but it means nothing to me. Do I take a right at the Price Chopper or a left at the McDonald's? I'm a landmark person. So I started, especially in conversations with my girls, referring to how many grandmothers ago. Like it was one grandmother ago that women began to have the right to have a credit card. It was three grandmas ago that World War One began and women were allowed in the workplace, which sort of started this cascade of things. And it's important to recognize how we've lost our support systems through those transitional periods. We used to be multi-generational, right? Our parents helped us take care of our kids, and then in return, we took care of our parents as they were less able to, and it sort of carried that way. And then after World War II, like they needed to get women out of the workplace and back into the home, so we went to this nuclear family thing, and the older people were put in a home somewhere where we could like visit them when it was convenient. But uh despite the fact that shortly after we made that a thing, we made single income impossible to support a whole family, but that's a whole other conversation. But it's that that lack of it's become kind of a trope that it takes a village, but it's not wrong. Um, something I didn't really address with the mother thing was we do baby showers. And and I get them. I get the getting some loot, especially if like when I had my first and my second, I was incredibly poor. And I wouldn't have had what I needed to take care of my children without a baby shower. But at that time, I didn't know that there was something called a blessing way. And before the baby was born, a group of women would gather and make an entire day about the woman about to birth. And it was her last chance to for everything to be about her for just a minute before everything, her whole world became about somebody else. And as I looked into those, I realized how important they were. I recently hosted a baby shower for my husband's cousin, and we did a traditional baby shower because her boyfriend wanted to be involved and their coworkers, and none of them were super into or understood like her Native American culture and the other things that I wanted to incorporate that I felt were important to her. So I found ways, but there are all these other cultures like where we're taking care of the mom is important, where it's not just about, hey, as long as there's a baby for everybody to snuggle at the end, nothing else matters. And so like this red string I'm wearing, um, we everyone at her baby shower, we wrapped the string and I called out her whole mother line as far back as I knew it. I went to her mom and asked her ancestral line as far back as she had access to. And in the name of them and her mother line and all of the ancestors, asked for their protection for her and her child. And then I gave my mother line and requested their protection and all of our ancestors. And I went through, and if anyone didn't know or have their mother line, that was fine. It was just your ancestors, you know. And then after everybody had the string wrapped around, we cut it, we tied it, And now every woman that was present there is wearing one of these. And each morning I'll send her a picture of this on my wrist. I'm thinking of you and the baby and sending you whatever support that you need today. Let me know if you need anything. And I think that sort of tradition and ritual and tribal, for lack of a better word, support has been lost and needs to be refound, reestablished. And other cultures, it never went away. Like the Chinese culture of sitting the month. I'm not even going to try and say the actual word for it because I'll butcher it. And but basically, it's staying home for 30 days. There's a specific diet that helps you recover and restore balance. But there's all of the women in the family are a part of that. They all take turns, come help take care of the mother. And the funny thing is in most cultures, when they come and help take care of the mother, it isn't, give me that cute baby to hold while you go clean. It's whatever. You want me to hold the baby while you shower? I'll do that. You want me to clean the house so you can snuggle your baby without feeling bad? I'll do that. What it's based on what mom needs, not on what I want to do while I'm there. And they have things to help physical recovery, wrapping and binding. Malaysia calls it Beng Hung. China has it as a part of the sitting in month. Latin America calls it Vaja or Banda. Africa calls it Diaspora. All these cultures, almost, America is almost exclusively one of the only cultures that doesn't respect this postpartum period and the physical and emotional recovery necessary and the tribe necessary to support that. And that's why, in my opinion, we have some of the highest rates of postpartum depression, psychosis, and maternal mortality. And so again, it's hard because all of these things could be their own whole ass class because there's so many critical transitions. But as we start to make these connections with each other, or even facilitate connections between other people where that's not really where we belong. I know somebody who knows somebody and they connect, and that builds a village for the people that need it. Yes, Maya.
So, as I listen to you, it is such a beautiful thing to support an expectant mom in that. But I think that it applies to so much in life beyond, like, having a pregnant mom in our lives gives us an excuse to focus on the pregnant mom, right? But it applies across the board, and we need to normalize supporting each other even when we're not in crisis. But,
Yes.
For example, I'm going to take a different woman in crisis story, but in a way, I did the same thing. So, years ago, in 2012, my oldest daughter was getting married. And in January of that year, her mother-in-law to be was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And I guess it was February. And in early March, she was going in for her first chemo treatment. And I woke up super early on the morning of her first chemo treatment. And I just knew that I needed to reach out to her. I didn't know her that well at that point, but I knew she didn't have a strong support system. So I sent her an email and I said, look, I'm awake really early. I can only imagine the anxiety that you're experiencing. And I just want you to know that I'm here. And what that began was I sent her an email every morning for about 5 months as she went through her journey. And during her second round of chemo treatments, I live quite a ways. She lives in Florida and I live in Maine. I actually flew down because when you are going through cancer treatments, your whole nourishment system changes because your immunity is gone, so you can't eat fresh fruit or veg. There's a lot of things. Plus, the chemo changes how everything tastes, so nothing tastes good to you. So she was, and eating is, and the nourishment's so important. So I would be, I flew down and here are the questions I asked her. I'm like, what are you craving that you can't have? And I will find a way to get you that. And she's like, well, I'm craving fruit, bananas in particular. And I'm like, and of course, I'm thinking, I want to get some protein into her. I want to get some carbs into her. I want it to be delicious. I ended up making her banana bread pudding, which she was just like, oh my God, this tastes so good. And she wanted um, chicken corn chowder. And I'm like, never made it before, but I'll make it for you. So, like, that week was about nourishing her emotionally, physically, spiritually. And, when someone's going through a physical illness, a pregnancy, a trauma, a breakup, whatever, we think to nourish women then. But how amazing would it be if we just started to think about nourishing each other physically, spiritually, emotionally on a regular basis because we all need that. So I would love to see that become a thing.
Oh, me too. Me too. Well, the turning on each other, the demonizing each other, the finding ways to point out how not we're better. It does. It's not an egotistical we're better than. It's a at least we're not that bad off. It's more of a self-comfort thing, but it doesn't make it any less toxic. And that was with my girls, my eldest, social media and her became teenagers about the same time. And
Yeah.
she would repost these things and say these things. And I'm like, do you mean that though? Like, do you, if that were said about you, what would that do to your heart, And pick me girls and the way somebody dressed or wore makeup or this or that. And so I fostered in them that we have we're all we have. As far as women go, we are all we have right now. And supporting each other is everything. We aren't always born into our tribe. Sometimes we find our
So true.
tribe. And that support is everything. So the first inclination we have, you see a girl walking down the street wearing, this is just a broad example, wearing something and you think she doesn't have the body to be wearing that, or whose attention is she trying to get? But it's the second thought you have that is, I don't think that. That's not what I think at all. I think she looks amazing, or whatever the case may be. It's that corrected thought that matters. Because the first one is your cultural training. The second one is your soul saying, no, 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 no. How about this?
Allie has a question.
It's not so much a question. It's more a thing that I've noticed. When I was young, like in the 70s, um, dinner parties and community gatherings, like huge dinner parties. I remember my parents having like 50, 60 people at times. I mean, my father was Greek and well, my mum's half Greek. And so you can imagine, the the sheep on the spit, the whole my big fat Greek wedding thing, which I have to admire the Greeks for. They have kept that tradition going. But What I noticed, what I have noticed, is that as I got older, the good old dinner party where we all got together and nurtured each other and communed and broke bread and connected and talked crap or whatever it was, got all our released everything we needed to release, and all those it's a fundamental part of being human. That slowly but surely has absolutely eroded. I, it's amazing to me how little people connect. But I've noticed, and possibly in the last 3 years, that the dinner party, well, certainly in our community, and Jan might be able to corroborate this, but we're getting together more and more again. We have potluck dinners where everybody brings food. We had one last night, and the literally that the table was groaning with the most delicious homemade food, and we had beautiful conversations and went into the lounge and did a meditation together. And it's something that I believe needs to come back into our whole cultural way of being, because actually the younger generations don't know this. They've never experienced this. And I find that extremely sad in many respects. It's the loss of something. I mean, my children have experienced this, but they've been described as old-fashioned, not in a negative way, but people are always surprised at my kids at how old school they are, because I guess they've got used to me opening my door and saying, come on in, bring the food, I'll make food, that all that stuff. And so I'm proud of that fact that they're old school and that they can connect. They can connect. They also have their issues. I mean, they're certainly not saints, but yeah, it's something we've lost. And I think what you're talking to, Stephanie, is that exact thing, that we've lost that connection with each other, and it's so important to bring it back. Yeah.
It is. It's critical. We reached a point where you could say anything behind a keyboard and not face your words, for a lack of a better way to put it. I have a rule for myself that I never say anything behind someone's back that I haven't already said to their face, or just haven't had the opportunity to, but absolutely will. And that doesn't exist within the keyboard generation. And so the rule for my kids was two things. If you're going to post something, you better research it to the ends of the earth, because if you agree with it, you better research it even more than that. Because if you repost something and you haven't, and you're spreading ignorance, you're losing all access to all social media. That was the rule. But in addition to that, it was anything that you say behind that keyboard, you better be willing to say to somebody's face. And that comes back, that connecting. And it's critical. It's critical. And it's us. It's our generation as the elders of the community. That MAGA crone thing, it is up to us to help teach these younger women, this younger generation, how to have these connections, because a lot of that has been lost. They've been raised by tablets and computers and this and that and the other. Not everybody, but enough that we have to reestablish that culture of connection.
So
Yeah,
Stephanie, we've
so
got about 15 minutes left. So do we want to finish up the slides?
yes, yes. Um, so I'm currently going through this right now. This MAGA perimenopause era. And I will say that when menopause was talked about, which was hardly ever, it was sort of a you go to bed as a fertile period having person, and then you wake up as a not period having, not fertile person. And sometimes you become a grumpy old hag about it, and sometimes you don't. Nobody ever explained to me that it could take 2 to 10 years for that transition to happen, and that is a roller coaster that for all the things you've done, whether you've given birth and raised children or had wild careers, or there's nothing comparable to that, because everyone in your life who knows you as whoever you are is like, who the fuck are you? And what did you do with our mother, our wife, our sister, or whatever? And so this perimenopause thing is now actually becoming a part of the national conversation. Again, it's these women finally us finding our tribes and creating these support systems. But it's the autumn of a woman's life. And I don't know about anybody else, but fall is absolutely my favorite season. It's not too hot, it's not too cold. And while everything is dying, it is beautiful. Everything is just sort of quieting down. It's right before winter, where previously that was a survival thing, but now it means we get to kind of turn in. Um, it used to just be, like I said, the triple goddess, maiden, mother, crone. That was it. But that was when women really didn't live long enough to reach menopause. So now as our lifespans increased, the time between mother and crone, kind of a vacuum has happened. And I don't know where everybody else is at, but at 47, I am in a place where I am not yet a crone. I'm on my way there. Kind of can't wait. I'm kind of excited about it. But really, I'm in this weird midlife place where every year, I'm willing to eat less shit and take less shit, and I stand up for myself more. But I also want to embrace these younger generations more and share my wisdom, and not in a I know the things and you don't, you should listen to me way, but in a hey, come hang out with me in the kitchen while we cook and let's have a conversation. Or let's go for a drive and look at the foliage and have a conversation. Or hey, here's a playlist that totally makes me feel good. Give it a listen. Tell me what you think. There's all of these things in between mother and crone now that didn't exist before. And it's when we're really able to start to express our gifts and step out of our comfort zones and be our most authentic self. Um, there's some icky bits, cycle irregularities. I went a whole 7 months, and you only have to go 1 year. You go 1 year and it's menopause. I went 7 months, and then I cycled with one of my daughters, and I was like, oh, I just started all over. I have a whole nother year. Hot flashes, night sweats. I don't actually have breast tenderness. The only time I ever had that, 3 times in my life, 3 kids. That tells you that. Um, because I don't have a cycle for months at a time. When I do have one, I feel like I'm having all of those months at once. Pain wise, mood wise, everything. The brain fog, until I talked with another, my husband's aunt. Her and I just were having a casual conversation. And when she was telling me what she was going through, I was like, oh, thank goddess, because I thought I was losing my ever loving mind. I can't concentrate on anything. My memory exists only in post-it notes. If it's not on a post-it note tape somewhere, it doesn't exist for me. And then the the sex drive stuff, like, almost mimics pregnancy, where zero interest, don't fucking touch me, or um hornier than a 10-peckered toad. Like, I want all the things. And we're in a place right now where that, like, this part of life also means we don't have a lot of time. Like, it's not like we can just go mess around on the kitchen counter like newlyweds. We have a house full of people. We have, you know, all of these things. So it's it's a lot to navigate and manage. And that is something we definitely need our tribe and our support system for. And just hearing another person talk about it makes you feel like less of a crazy person. You're like, oh, so it's not just me. I don't need to go take the 72-hour vacation at the hospital. This is just that's a natural part of life. It- we've kind of been conditioned that we're hysterical and all of these icky connotations that have to do with having feelings. Um, but when we talk to each other, when we share with each other, when we share that wisdom with younger people, and when older people share their wisdom with us, yeah, it's it's everything. Like, the speaking of the t-shirt, the I saw one that said it was it was making fun of Live Laugh Love, and it was Live Laugh Toaster Bath. And I thought, that's where we're at. I mean, it's funny.
Yeah, yeah, I love that one. Yep.
I was a 911 dispatcher, so I've got the gallows humor. I do. But at the same time, is that where we're at? Like, really? Um, Again, prone is what I know a lot of people fear aging. Um, I don't. I don't know why, but I don't. I don't mind getting older. I love getting older. Every year I get a little bit more freedom from societal bullshit. When I was in my 20s and I would go to get my car fixed, I knew that one, they were going to try and take advantage of me. Two, I was likely going to be hit on in some icky way. All of these things, I had to have all of these backup plans. I carried my keys a certain way when I was walking in the dark from one building to my car, all of these things. Now that I'm reaching this crone stage, I go to the mechanic. They are so good to me. And you want to know why? It's not because I'm hot. It's because I remind them of their mother, and they would never want to screw their mom over. And I'm like, oh, this crone thing has some benefits. There's a little respect that comes with that. And not being sexualized removes a whole bunch of layers of shit that I didn't realize I was wading through. I'm like, I actually like not being seen as a sexual being for a minute, because people hear me, people see me. I'm seen and I'm heard because they're not hyper focused on my fertility from a survival standpoint, my fertility or sexuality. It's it's so freeing. And feminine wisdom has been, I don't know why it's so dangerous. I don't know why it's so scary. They didn't burn witches, they burned midwives and healers and wise women and crones. And I don't know why that's so threatening, but it's our time. It is absolutely our time. The music that I'm hearing being put out now, this respect for the elder women of the world, these younger women are just starving for what we have to offer them as a community, as a tribe, with our divine feminine wisdom and knowledge and all these things we have to share. And coincidentally, it's when our hearts start to be called to that. So it fits perfectly. This is the winter of our lives, the new moon. There are all these foods. These are the things that you eat that are nurturing the hormonal shifts and changes that are happening. Once you get to a certain point of crone, you have a little bit more latitude and freedom, honestly. With whatever your body can take and handle, you can kind of do what you want. But during the transition, you definitely need to nurture and foster that transition and have grace for yourself. Because I really, really have had a few moments where I'm like, do I need to call the men in the white coats, as I used to say? Because I really feel like I'm not okay. But it's this transition. It's hard. It's difficult. So yeah, but the more that we're there for each other, um, and the more that we are nurturing ourselves, um, with food, whether it be the symbolism or the effects of the ingredients in and of themselves, um, the more that we're doing that, the more that we have to offer to the generations coming up behind us. And that's everything. That's how we, I don't want to overstate it and say save the world, but that's how we change the world. I don't know really what else to say besides that.
So I think that we've got just a couple minutes left if anybody has any questions, comments, thoughts.
What's sea vegetables?
I'm I'm sorry.
List. What do you mean by sea vegetables?
It's sort of
Like
cutting
sea, the
in and
sea
out.
vegetables.
Like kelp,
Oh,
like
sorry.
seaweed,
Oh,
like
okay.
seaweed. Yeah.
yeah, which incidentally, my daughters love seaweed as a snack. I'm not a huge fan, but I ate it a lot postpartum, so
I'm not a fan either, but my daughter loves it as well. So it
yeah.
must be addressing something they need.
Yeah, yeah, that's the only thing I can think of. But actually, and that's huge in the Asian cultures, is
It is.
the during that transition is all of those sea type veggies.
Let's say the kelps, the seaweed, those types of vegetables. And no, I think there were more than that. Seaweed is a seaweed. Okay. Because I think it's high in iodine.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, similar to kale and spinach. It has a lot of the same nutritional values that those do.
Thank you. It's great.
But
Well,
so one thing I didn't say real quick before we all go is something we don't really honor here that is honored in most other cultures is that age, the aging, the elder, almost almost every other community respects the elder and the wisdom they have to share and all of these things. And in Japan, it's called Kenriki. It's your rebirth. The 60th birthday is considered the beginning of your second childhood. And I think that's something we need to bring back. We need to bring it over here and make it a thing. Because
Yeah.
on my 60th birthday, I'm having a princess unicorn party with glitters and sparkles and all the things. So
It's the same in the African culture. Um, you know, becoming old is actually a rite of passage, and these huge amounts of respect and love and nurturing that's actually given to the elderly, which is completely and utterly ignored in the West. And in fact, you know, we lock our old people away, a lot of
yeah,
us, um,
yeah,
and or they choose to lock themselves away from the family because they don't want to be a burden. Um, and that concept in Africa is absolutely ludicrous,
yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
ludicrous. Because everybody in a village, everybody who is of a certain age is there's no word for grandmother or grandfather. Everybody is your mother or your father. There's no word for auntie or uncle either.
I love that.
All cousins. You're all mother, father, or brother, sister.
So it's
It's
just generational.
and some kids don't even know who their parents are
Yes, yeah,
because
yeah,
everybody is all the adults. So if their parent dies, and this isn't a traditional African community, if their parent dies, the whole family mourns that, but you don't even know, half those children don't even know that it's their actual birth parents.
yeah.
Mm,
See, that is the true village raising the child. I like that.
mm. It's beautiful. Mm, yeah. Well, thank you is all I want to say, Stephanie. It's been an amazing session. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is such an amazing example of us sharing our soul wisdom. And I thank you for everything that you've gone through to gain this wisdom and especially to share it with us today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. It's it's like the tendrils of a vine. I can't talk to everybody, but if everyone I talk to shares a little bit of something with someone else, then it means something.
Yeah. Mm, mm, for sure.
All right. Well, we will close the session for today and let you all go with much love. And we will see you again from Stephanie's house next week, where she has graciously invited me to come and use her kitchen, which used to be my kitchen, to talk about Sacred Table and Sacred Kitchen. So, very excited for that next week as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.